All right, Josh Smith here at my studio, live from Flat Five. Today, my guest is a newer friend, but he's already been invaluable. He's always there with like encouraging words and a lot of advice. And I would say, not just as a guitar player and musician, he's become one of the premier, I think, educators on any subject in the world. He's just a tremendous guy, a tremendous musician with an incredible career in education and music production and performance. He really knows his shit. And when I need inspiration in the last 3 years, the first place I go is to look at his channel and just anything pretty much. Any video I'll pull up will give me some sort of inspiration. And it's a pleasure to talk to him today. Rick Beato, thanks, dude. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Josh. And I just so everybody knows, I paid Josh to say that.
Exactly. He actually wrote it out for me. I got it last night in the email. Dude, so I've been asking everybody because I'm so curious for guitar players, especially how they got their start. Some people have musical families, some don't. Some it's a brother or a best friend. I lucked out. My dad just brought a guitar home randomly. He was not a musician, but he wanted a musician in the family, I guess. I know you played cello, but how did the guitar first get in your hands?
Well, my mom's dad played guitar, and so I was always around guitars as a little kid. But when I was in seventh grade, um, I broke my ankle first day of summer, seventh grade, and my one of my brothers, I have four brothers, had bought this guitar for $1, this really cheap acoustic called a Global. And I couldn't
Okay.
do anything because I couldn't walk on this cast. It was a really bad break. And I was stuck for 13 weeks, laid up for the entire summer. So I had a chord book and an acoustic guitar, and I just started playing. That's it.
Wow. And what kind of music were you already into music? Like, were there things you were fans of, or was it just what your parents listened to?
No, no. So I've got six siblings. I'm the second youngest, so they all listen to different things. My older sisters listen to the Beatles and the Stones, things like that. Then I mean, my brother and sister listen to everything: Hendrix, Zeppelin, the Allman Brothers. I mean, everyone had different styles of music that they liked, and we had a very small house, and everybody had their own little cassette players or stereos and everything. So we all listened to our own music, but we were influenced by a lot of different things. And as I started, I grew up in this, I was born in 62. So I was influenced by things late 60s, early 70s. And,
Yeah.
you know, so
So then, what was the first thing that really grabbed you and just like totally set the hook? Like, you couldn't believe how great this was.
I, well, the first thing I learned to play really was Hey Joe, Hendrix.
Ah, yeah.
That was the first, that's one of the first songs I learned to, well, the first song I learned to play was this America song called Never Found the Time. But then
Yeah.
I started, one of the benefits of starting on the cello is I had chops already. So once I learned chords, I could play single notes. So when it came to playing scales or riffs, I had all the coordination
Mhm.
to play things. But some of the things that were weird are bending notes, because obviously on the cello you do a lot of slides. But so I had to get used to that. And I loved that. I loved playing lead guitar. That was really, really fun.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and playing songs for your friends. I mean, that was the thing. It's like, how many different cover songs do you know? People would just, oh, do you know this? Do you know that? Do you know this? Do you know that? So I learned as many songs as I could.
So when do you start like getting together with friends and the whole garage band thing, or just playing playing with other people?
That was pretty much within about 6 months or so.
Wow.
I ran into a kid at a music store that was a drummer. His name was Andy, and his older brother was in a rock band that was a great high school rock band. And so he gave me a cassette. He said, let's start a band. I said, okay. And he made a cassette of 9 cover songs that he wanted me to learn. And I said, what do you mean learn? He said, just listen to them and figure them out. And it was like Aqualung. Um, it was Don't Take Me Alive, Steely Dan with Larry
Wow.
Carlton. It was
Yeah.
Long Distance Run Around. Um, all these weird, just random songs, some that were really difficult. Wouldn't Want to Be Like You, Alan Parsons, something like that. Just
Jeez.
just random songs. But so I'm figuring out Larry Carlton guitar solos, and I went over to his house, and his older brother, who's a really good guitar player, um, heard me start to play these things. He's like, "How'd you figure that out?" I said, "I just listened to it." So,
Are
anyways,
you 12 basically then? Seventh grade, something like that?
13,
12,
13.
13. Yeah. Wow. So you guys start getting together. Did you find a bass player quickly or something?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We started playing, uh, we did a couple gigs, went through a few different variations of the band, and started playing probably around ninth grade or so. We're doing more gigs, and then I played sports a lot, so I didn't have as much time. I was into sports, but then I kept getting more and more serious about music, and I was just obsessed with the guitar. And then I switched from cello to upright bass, which I ended up finishing. And I actually started that in seventh grade, and then I did my undergrad in classical bass. So
Man, I mean, having music in school like that, so many people younger than me that I've talked to already had absolutely zero music in their school. Like no jazz band, no nothing, you know. And I did have music in my school. I'm probably like one of the last generation where it was just mandatory. I mean, don't you think that's an enormous benefit?
yes, we had 11 full-time faculty, music faculty in our school district. So we had a 60-piece orchestra, 60-piece wind ensemble, concert band, jazz band, marching band. Everyone had private lessons, hundreds of kids in the music program, and
Yeah.
everyone had private lessons. And then everybody took lessons outside of school too. So
And you're in Ithaca, right?
I was in Rochester.
Yeah, so I mean that's a big town, but it's not New York City or something. This
No,
was all across America, every place. I mean,
right.
it's unbelievable how
Yeah.
somehow that's just disappeared. So when does the transition go into like paying gigs and that feeling of getting that first $50 shoved in your pocket?
I started making money on gigs in high school, definitely.
Yeah.
And you got to, so I played bars in high school because the drinking age was 18 and that wasn't even a thing. So there was never a thing like, oh, if you're underage, you can't go play at a bar. Nobody ever, this is in the 70s, you know,
Mm.
that was not a thing. Nobody ever checked. Nobody cared if you were underage and you were playing in a band. You just go in, you load in, do sound check and play your gig, you get paid. And that was it, you know?
And what'd your parents think about that?
Oh, they loved it. Parents loved music, and they were incredibly supportive of everything I did musically. They wanted one of their kids to be a musician at least. So
Because I was lucky in that way. I started playing, yeah, at clubs like that when I was 12 and 13. But by then, I couldn't. I mean, I had to be there with my parents. Plus, I looked like a midget. I was a very small little kid, uh, so I couldn't have been allowed in there without at least one of them. But yeah, I can't imagine what it would have been like to be at the same time when I was playing those gigs, just to go by myself at 15 or 16 or something, and
yeah, I
wander
mean, we went by ourselves all the time. Never even thought about it.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I mean, it sounds like you were kind of already, you had played cello and upright bass, you could read, and you were teaching yourself Larry Carlton solos and stuff like that. When did you get into straight ahead jazz for the first time? What was like the first thing you heard that just blew you away?
Um, well, I when I was 15, my dad bought me Joe Pass Virtuoso.
Okay.
My dad was a huge jazz fan, and he loved Joe Pass. It was his favorite guitar player. And he gave me that record, and he said, "If you ever learn to play guitar like this, you've accomplished something with your life." And my dad worked for the railroad. He was a blue collar. Both my parents. My mom worked in a factory, but my dad loved jazz. And I remember looking at the record, Josh, for a couple of months. I didn't even open it up, and then one day I opened it up. I put it on. I started listening to it, and I said, "Wow, this is amazing." So I figured out one of the tunes on there, "All the Things You Are," and I played it for my dad. Played like the first 2 minutes of it for my dad when he got home from work, and he said, "How did you figure that out?" I just listened to it.
Wow, man. So it was Joe Pass, not Charlie Parker or Dizzy or Miles or something. It was guitar. It had to be guitar to
It
kind
was
of set the
guitar.
mood.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
really because he bought me that. But my dad, but we listened to jazz all the time. I also had a guy, Josh, that whose lawn I mowed. He lived about 2 blocks away from me. And I didn't. His name was Tom Rizzo, and he owned a store, T Rizzo Music, and he was a great jazz guitar player. He's still around. He ended up selling the store. They had probably 5 or 6 jazz guitar teachers there, and they were the best guitar players in
Wow.
Rochester. And Tom went on to play with Maynard Ferguson. He played on the Tonight Show. Oh, he was an amazing, still, I mean, still around. He's an amazing guitar player. And I started taking lessons from him when I was about 15, 16 or so. And
Okay.
so that was another thing. You know, jazz is really big up in Rochester, and it was in the 70s. There were so many great jazz musicians. So it was very common to play. You know, you just learned Charlie Parker tunes, you just learned standards and played gigs with people.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Another thing I'm always curious about. So you're coming up, getting your hands on the guitar late '60s. So you're hearing Hendrix and Cream and Beatles and all that stuff, and everybody and their brother is buying a guitar in the whole
Yep.
country at that time. And it's like, yeah, you can't help but like walk out onto your block and find three guys who just bought a guitar or a bass or a drum and make friends. It must have been incredible at that time when it was just everybody wanted to play music. Even if it didn't last. They all tried. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, there was I everybody I knew had a guitar, took guitar lessons or piano lessons or something. Everybody I knew played instruments, and
That's
so many people played guitars. Man, it was just to start a band. There were bass players, drummers, guitar players everywhere.
See, and that's what drove me to go play with adults because I couldn't find anyone my age who was into it at all, especially not like jazz and blues. Like, I could find nobody who was into what I was into. And I played sports too, and all my friends were from that. I had no music friends, and yeah, it was really, yeah, it's amazing how quickly that changed. You get through the 80s and it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so you're gigging, you're making money. You go to college for upright bass, right? Um, what happens when you graduate college? Do you think you're going to be a professor right away, or a performance guy? What's your plan at that moment?
So I finished my undergrad and I got a music ed major with my classical bass, and then I went to New England Conservatory and got a jazz guitar degree.
Okay.
And as soon as I finished that, I was like, okay, I'm going to move to New York City and be a jazz guitar player. But then I got offered this teaching job teaching at Ithaca College in upstate New York. And then, so I ended up doing that for 5 years. And that was unplanned. My old guitar teacher, because I had done my undergrad there, my old guitar teacher, Steve, said, we opened up a position. We want you to teach on the jazz faculty. Basically, the jazz faculty was he and I. We taught all the jazz courses.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, I'll try this out for a couple of years. I ended up doing it for 5 years.
But it wasn't something you had written down like, oh, I'm going to go into teaching right away.
No, it's kind of like YouTube, like getting into YouTube. Just
But
started it.
did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed it for the first 4 years or so, and then as I got in my later 20s, my I started noticing around 1991. So I taught from 87 to 92. Around 91, students started coming in and they were complaining about stuff. Oh, Rick is too hard of a teacher and all this. And it was just it was like something changed and all the students just became, would complain about stuff. You couldn't, and the dean would be like, well, don't be so hard, don't be so hard on the students, blah, blah, blah. And just stuff that never happened before,
Uh-huh.
and then I kind of had enough of it after that. Well, that wasn't really the reason that I left. I left because I got a publishing deal, and
Right.
but I was, after a while, it was great. I mean, being a college professor was really fun, but I couldn't have done it for a whole career. No way.
Right. Okay. So you talked about you left because you got a publishing deal. Were you writing always as a kid? Were you always writing, or when did that become like a real inspiration and something you wanted to do a lot? And when did it become like, oh, I should focus on this? I can make money off of this.
Well, I wrote. Um, I wrote songs in my high school bands. So we
Did okay.
yeah, so we had original songs. So I always kind of wrote music on my own, and then I started playing with some people in Ithaca outside. You know, when I was a professor, and one of the guys I was writing with, we ended up getting a publishing deal with Polygram at the time, and that's what actually why I left my teaching gig, because I got a we got a publishing advance, and so I did songwriting. So starting
And
around 92 is when I left. So
and what's that feeling like when someone on a major label covers, your song for the first time and it's like, justified, I guess, the being a professional songwriter, because I mean that's a decision, like to get up every day, write songs, to make that your job, like it is like that's you got to want to do that.
yeah, it was really fun writing songs, but I stopped. The last time I did a songwriting session was in 2006, 2015, I think 2016. I was going up to Nashville. I had a country song, a number one country song in 2000, beginning of 2014.
Hmm.
And I was going up to Nashville I'm in Atlanta. I was going up there um, about 3 4 days a month, and and writing with all the top writers up there. And it was fun. The guys were so fun to write with. But after a while, it's if you don't live in Nashville, and that was really the only feasible thing, because at that time, by 2016, there were no rock bands to write for anymore, because I wrote with a lot of bands up
Yeah.
until then that I produced. Then it was like you had to move to country music for writing if you played guitar and you wrote songs that were guitar based. So and then I didn't want to move to Nashville, so I well, I started my YouTube channel, honestly, and that's when I stopped going up doing songwriting sessions, honestly.
Well, when you started the channel, did you think it would be like something you would have to spend this much time on? It would become basically your job, or was it something for fun when you initially started it?
Well, I would do most of my videos at the beginning of my channel for the first year. I was doing at night after my sessions, so I just
Mm.
would pull out my iPhone and make a video, and then be half asleep when I'm editing it, put it up. Then I'd realize I had a bunch of mistakes in it in the morning. I'd take it down, I'd fix it, and I'd put it back up again. That was
Right.
my daily thing.
That
Somebody would call me and say, "What's up with your video?" It's like you walked out of the room and walked back in. You have a bad edit in there. It's like, what? And I look at it, it'd be like 3 minutes of nothing, of just the empty chair there.
oh man.
So I'd take it down, put
uh,
it back up.
well, you talked a little bit about producing. I mean, you've produced a lot of records. Did you ever think that was something you would even want to get into, or did you just fall into it?
I kind of fell into that too, because I had a buddy of mine that asked me to come over to his house. He was working on a record with his band. They were based out of here, called the Tender Idols, and they asked me to come over and just stop over and check out what they were doing. And then I ended up helping out on this one song. I said, they asked me my opinion. I said, well, I think the verse melody should do this. And if you sang this, and then you should go to here in the chorus and everything. So then they said, well, why don't you produce the record? And I said, okay. And I started that. And it's interesting because that band, so I worked with them on their first record. Then I played with them for a little bit. I filled in as their bass player. And then I um, produced their second record. Dave Cobb was in the band. I don't know if you know Dave Cobb, the
Yeah, he's a
producer.
big producer. He used to be
Yeah.
out here, and now he's in Nashville. Yeah.
Dave's an old friend of mine, and I knew Dave before he was even in that band, and he had another band he was in before that, and but that was Dave's band. That was one. Dave was in the Tender Idols, and they were like a Brit pop band, and so that was the first band I produced. That was in about '95 or so, and then I really, I started doing more and more records, and by '99 it was from '99 till 2016. It was, you know, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Hundreds of records I produced.
And having not said, so I have some experience with this. It's a new thing for me the last 5 years. I've
Mhm.
produced probably 5 records a year, other than my own for other artists, and it was something I never had any interest in doing. But all of a sudden, I quickly fell in love with it, and I realized how much of a better musician it made me, and how much it impacted my own playing and music. Did you feel that way right away, kind of?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. You learn about arrangement, about parts. You learn about parts with all different instruments. I mean, for me, the big thing was the engineering and mixing part that I was really fascinated by. That was probably the most fun element of it because I love engineering and mixing. And
And
so
did you have any experience, like, were you into that at all before that? You know, where to put the mic on your amp, or did you care at all about any of those
never
things?
cared. And I've been in studios so many times, Josh. I never paid attention. People would get sounds, and you'd say, oh, "I don't like that sound." It's
Yeah.
this, it's that. But I didn't know. Okay, it's boxy. Take out 1K, or it's you
Hmm.
know. And then when I started engineering myself, then you take it to a different level of listening, and
Yep.
that was really fun.
Yeah, I when I first moved here to LA and started doing sessions, first it took me a minute to even figure out like how much what gear I needed to bring, because I'd never done anything but my own music. So I had to learn how to, do what people were asking me. But then I went once with Mike Landau to a session, and I saw he not only did he bring his rack and his own mic pre's and everything, he brought his own 57 because he was certain of how that one sounded. And he
Right.
would not let anybody place it on the amp. He might, and it was like, wait a minute. So I started asking questions, like, why are you doing that? Why you put it right there on the speaker? Like, and it was like, yeah, I need to pay more attention to this stuff. And my personality is, okay, if I get excited about anything, then I become obsessive, and I'm gonna, go as fully down the rabbit hole as I can.
Yeah, that's I just for me even to this day, I like the videos that I do where there's engineering involved or production stuff are the most fun for me to make, even though I don't
Mm-hmm.
make that many of those, but those are the ones that I really have fun making.
That's cool, man. And I mean, I gotta ask. So now that you're, in the throes of this juggernaut, is it super rewarding? Like, do you really get that feeling of like you do from writing a song, from doing all of what you're doing now?
Oh yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
very fun. It's some of the people that I've gotten to meet because of this, like yourself. I just interviewed Joe Satriani, that video I put out yesterday. I've interviewed Steve Vai and John Petrucci, and I mean, all my guitar player guys, Peter Frampton,
Yeah,
so
Robin, Eric Johnson, I've seen them all.
exactly. Robin,
Yeah,
Eric Johnson, Larry Carlton, Frank Gambale,
yeah,
you know, Victor Wooten, Dennis Chambers, Gary Husband. I've interviewed, Vinny Colaiuta.
yeah.
Uh, you know, that is amazing too. That part of it is getting to meet. I mean, some of the people I've known Vinny for 35 years or so, but a lot of these guys, I met Joe was on my Instagram live last week. Just Joe appeared in the chat and asked a question, and I
Wow.
was like, Joe, I want to interview you. I'm going to write you after this. I messaged him. We set it up, and we did it the other day. So there you go.
That is one of the great things about social media. It's like, it's also one of the drawbacks, but it's really easy to get a hold of somebody,
Right.
you know? Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Well, I had one question. Now, you're a family man, and everybody's seen the videos of you and your son working on ear training, which is ridiculously amazing. I just was wondering, I have a, 15-year-old son who's never had any interest. And I wonder, did Dylan or your kids, did they come to you pushing you for music? Was it something you guys just decided on? I'm always curious about that with kids.
Well, with Dylan, I played music for him when he was a baby, even before he was born, and he had these abilities. I realized that he had perfect pitch when he was 3 or so. So I started teaching him about music and telling him how chords were constructed, scales, modes, all these different things. But he's not that interested in music. Although I just heard him, he's practicing his oboe a little while ago for his band class, virtual band class. But
Right.
he started playing guitar recently, and my youngest Layla, she's 7. She's taking violin lessons, and my daughter Lennon, who's 11, she's taking guitar lessons and stuff. So
Mm.
they like music, but they're not like I was, and I'm sure like you were as a kid. It's just not, music doesn't occupy the same space that it did, because there's way too many uh, things that kids can do for passive entertainment now that
Oh
that
yeah.
you didn't have before.
Well, it's always interesting to me too. Like, you see sons or daughters of professional athletes go on to follow in their footsteps and become professional or musicians. But like my son, he hates whenever he's anywhere where it's my thing, like at a show or something where it's my event. Inevitably, the first question when anybody meets him is, "Oh, do you play guitar like your dad?" And he can't stand that question. You know what I mean? So I think it pushed him even further away from it.
It's tough with kids, man. They don't want to do anything that their that their parents do. At least now, kids nowadays. It was very common though when I was growing up that parents would have kids. Parents would be musicians, kids would be musicians. That was very common. I don't find that as much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's get into the 10 questions.
Shoot.
Here we go. Number 1, when you first started learning, you already said, "Hey Joe," but really what was the first thing just that you heard that was so great, there was no turning back. Like you got it under your fingers and you were so impressed with yourself that it's like, I can't believe I figured this out. That feeling.
Yeah. Um, Honestly, I think when I think when I figured out that "Don't Take Me Alive" solo, that I couldn't believe I
Oh,
figured that out.
that's a great, I mean, yeah, that's a great one. Uh, I mean,
That's kind of a
so
weird solo to figure out too, because it has so many. It's just a really complex solo,
oh
and
yeah.
and I knew so many musicians. It was a different thing because so many people played guitar really well where I was growing up, and to impress them, you had to play. You had to be able to play things that or figure out things that other people couldn't do, just to kind of get any recognition at all.
When that guy gave you the tape with that on there, were you hip to Steely Dan at all yet, or was that the first Steely Dan you heard?
No, no, no. I'd heard him because Kid Charlemagne was on the radio, and
Okay,
I mean I knew Do It Again and all the songs from the first record,
okay.
which came out in '72. So
Did you know who Larry was, or you just thought that was a guitar player in the band?
I knew who Larry was because
Wow.
I got because I had the Royal Scam record. This is the thing. Everybody when I was growing up, my oldest sister, she's not a musician at all. She's 67. She knows who Larry Carlton is and has Larry Carlton records. She's not even a musician at all. And people back then, it was very common to know all the session players.
Mm,
It's interesting because everybody looked at records. Everybody knew Steve Lukather. They knew Jay
yeah.
Grady. They knew all the guitar players that played with Steely Dan, all the musicians, the drummers, the bass players. Everybody knew them.
Wow.
Bernard Purdy, whoever. It didn't matter. You just knew all these people.
Yeah, I wish that was still the case. Well, that probably answers number 2, which is, what is the first solo you learned note for note? Was that the first
Well,
one you ever
no,
learned?
Hey Joe was the first solo I learned note for note.
Yeah, and you could sing it for the rest of your life. Like you'll never forget that solo ever. Yeah.
But my mom, I always tell this story, Josh. My younger brother John plays guitar. He's a very good guitar player, and he's been playing right since as soon as I picked up a guitar, he started playing within a few weeks, and he
Uh-huh.
still plays. He plays in cover bands. Anyways, but I learned Hey Joe, and then I'd solo over, or I would play chords for him, and then he would solo, and then it would be my turn to solo, and he'd put his guitar down, and we'd get in a fight. So finally, my mom got fed up with it. She's like, "I'll play chords for you." So my mom would play Hey Joe, the rhythm part on guitar. My old mom. She's like, "What are the chords?" It'd be like E G D A or C G D A E, and she's like, "Okay, no problem." And my mom would strum along and play it, and I would play lead to it.
Wow. See, now that's killer. Your mom comped for you because your brother wouldn't do it.
Right. I mean, she just got sick, Josh, of us fighting over it. She's like, "I'll just play chords for you." Okay.
And so you would always play for him, and he just wouldn't play for you.
Yeah. It would,
That's
I would play rhythm for him for 5 minutes. He'd play a solo. And
Yeah.
it's like my turn, and then he'd put his guitar down, then we fight with each
Oh,
other, and
oh, unbelievable. All right. What's the first thing you play when you pick up a guitar every day? Is there somewhere your hands just go?
Well, I usually play a G or a D chord to make sure to check to see if the guitar is in tune or not. I
Mm,
usually play both those chords
yeah.
and see if it's in tune with itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about like if you're in a music store or something, or someone hands you a guitar to check out? Do you have like a little thing that that's yours that lets you know if you even like this guitar? You have to try to see if it's doable.
No, I won't. I don't play in music stores anymore because I don't dare. I just kind of will pull out a guitar. I'll just kind of check it out a little bit, and then if I like it,
Yeah.
But I don't plug in and play at music stores anymore.
I think
But I
I think
think
that's
about that a lot.
yeah, I mean, it used to be something I did weekly without question most of
Yeah.
my life. And now, yeah, it's not as much a thing anymore. Yeah. Mostly they just don't have anything there I really have any interest in checking out anyways.
No, that's really honestly what it is. There's never any good instruments at music stores anymore. Very few, at least here in Atlanta, there isn't.
Really. Yeah. Um okay, so then what key, style, song, groove, something do you have something that plays on a loop? Like for me, I'm hearing some sort of shuffle or swing, like Charlie Parker in my head, mostly 24 hours a day. Some I just hear that all the time. It never goes away. Do you have something that always kind of comes and goes?
Um, I always tell people that I never unless actually am playing, I don't ever think about music.
Really?
Yeah, and it's funny. I think about music, but I don't hear music in my head because a lot of people are like, "How do you go to sleep after you've been working on a song all day?" And I said, "I just put it out of my mind."
That's I can't do that. I get in bed and it's like I almost have to, especially if I've been improving, I almost have to like finish the solo before I can turn off and get to bed. Like in my head, I have to run it over and finish it. Yeah, it's weird.
But I didn't used to be like that. It's a function of being 58 now, and when I was younger, I used to be like that. I used to always have solos going on in my head
And
constantly.
when you listen, I've been curious about this just in general. When you listen to music, like if you're in the car and Earth, Wind and Fire comes on or something, just whatever, anything is on the radio. What happens first? Are you analyzing or are you humming an improv over the changes? Because that's immediately I go to counterpoint of the melody or just playing a solo in my head over whatever. It could be Britney Spears. It doesn't matter.
Well, if it's Earth, Wind, and Fire, I'm getting mad because I can't do What Makes This Song Great because they'll block the video, and I'll just be thinking, God, I want to do Earth, Wind, and Fire so bad.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Wow. Oh, crazy. All right. Was there ever a moment when you felt like as an improviser you started to find your voice on the instrument, and was it like noticeable where, oh, I found something here that kind of is in my own lane and I should go further this way?
Yeah, when I was probably about 24 or so is when I started to feel that I had 24, 25 started to really have my own voice. I think I had kind of passed my transcription phase and all that, transcribing blues solos, fusion solos, jazz solos, and then I started to play my own style of the synthesis of everything I'd kind of put together and started playing things I liked the sound of that were my personality.
And was there a technique or something that, or something that came out that kind of triggered, like was new and you kind of recognized it? Anything like that?
I did. It's interesting because I learned Joe Pass solos when I was a teenager. I did a lot of hybrid picking, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the comping, Joe would play later on. Joe played only with his fingers, but you had to chord with your pick and then your fingers, and then go into single notes. So I started realizing, the fingers you can actually play lines with and everything. So then I started, And you didn't see that very often back then. You didn't see a lot of hybrid picking. And I started playing a lot of linear things that were really difficult, that had string crossings. And there were things that I didn't hear people do. And at the time, 30 years ago, 35 years ago. And that's when I really started to feel like, oh, this is kind of I have my voice. I play things that are unguitaristic, I
Yeah. Well,
guess.
in a similar way, hybrid picking is also a big part of me kind of feeling like maybe I've started to find what makes me me. And it was like I was already kind of obsessed with blues and done my history, and then I'd gotten into jazz and rock and roll and stuff. And but then when I started like learning Danny Gatton stuff and hybrid picking everything and bringing the technique in, was when I felt like, oh, this kind of does sound like me now. It's a mix of all these things, you know. And it was partially technique driven, yeah, by the hybrid picking thing.
Yeah.
Mm. Interesting. All right, what do you consider your biggest weakness on guitar?
Um, well, I didn't practice for about 25 years, and there's all these, there's a lot of things that I never, things that people do, that everybody does nowadays, that I never really learned to do. I mean, I can't economy pick or do anything like that. I'm an alternate picker. Um, and those things are, um, it's things that I really wish that I had learned to do when I was younger. There's things that there are technical things that are almost impossible to learn when you're an adult, when you're pushing 60
Mm.
years old, that you wish that you could do easily, but you just it's hard to get that, kind of hook those two things up,
Yeah,
so it's frustrating, honestly.
I know the feeling. I mean, it's like, man, if I had just put in the time when I had it, and there were no distractions, and it would have just happened quickly. And now it would be Herculean effort to pull that off. That might
Yeah,
not even be doable.
it's very hard to change your technique once you've been playing for 45 years or so. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, yeah. Dude, my weakness is acoustic guitar, like finger picking, pretty stuff. That's kryptonite for me. But it was funny. Like yesterday, Tosin was over here, and we were just hanging out. And so I just did the 10 questions with him, and I said, "Well, what's your biggest weakness?" And he said, "Well, I can't improvise or play blues at all." He's like, "That's by far my biggest weakness." So it's like, man, but he's got all these strengths that, again, like if I tried to do what he does, it would take me 40 years. Now, yeah, yeah, crazy stuff. Oh, who's a big influence on your guitar playing that people would be really surprised to hear?
Mm, God, I think that I always think that my playing is so it's obvious what my influences are. Um, um, there's a guitar player, Joe Diorio, that I was really into back, when I was in college, who played a lot of intervallic. Joe's still alive. He's in his, I want to say he's probably 80 or so now, but he taught at GIT back in the, in the 80s. And
Mm-hmm.
he was, I had, some of his records and his books, and I loved his style of playing, the intervallic playing like that. And
Yeah.
so he was definitely somebody that was influential. I mean, the people wouldn't know, probably. They don't know Joe Dior. You know who Joe is, I'm
Oh yeah,
sure.
I saw Joe. So he was in Miami a lot in the '90s, and that's where I grew up. And he would play with Ira Sullivan, who just passed
Yes.
away this
Yeah.
week, uh, at the airport. They would play at the airport, these gigs, and yeah, it would be like Ira Sullivan, Joe Diorio, and a drummer, and Joe would be the only harmony, and Ira
Awesome.
would be just blowing his brains out. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, unbelievable stuff. Yeah. And if you don't know Ira Sullivan, he was a South Florida legend, but you should look him up.
Absolutely.
All right. Would you rather have a great guitar and a shitty amp, or vice versa? A great amp and a bad guitar on a gig situation?
Boy, that's tough. God, I want to have a great guitar and amp. Oh no,
Yeah,
I
well,
can't get that.
of course.
Um, well, I've had really bad playing guitars, but had a great sound. So I
Mhm.
would say that a great sounding amp with a bad playing guitar for sure.
I'm
No question
I'm
about it.
100% with you, but it's been split down the middle, 50-50.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's been split, but I know I can make the show better for the audience with whatever guitar and a tone that's happening versus vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
The
right.
tone is everything because the tone inspires everything that you play, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. And I always err on the side of what's going to give the audience the better show. And my comfort level will be better with the better amp as opposed to the better guitar, without
Yeah.
question. Yeah. All right, man. What keeps you like working on new shit? And I mean, I watch every day on Instagram. You post something. You're practicing. You're working on shit. What keeps you so motivated to be learning new stuff and be better tomorrow than today? Because not everybody does.
Um, it's fun. If I would never ever think of retiring or anything like that, because I love to practice. I love to play music. I love to play multiple instruments, and I wish I could just practice all the time and play gigs and things like that because I just have so much fun playing. So I look forward to coming down here now that I've made Instagram kind of a morning routine.
Right.
Play something, put it out, and that's kind of how I start my day. I think of an idea, I play it. It's weird how for me how different my chops are from day to day. Though I have a lot of I have arthritis in my hands, and my wife and I were putting together this exercise thing, and I was screwing all these things using this ratchet set and wrenches and everything, and I was saying, God, my middle finger's killing me, my thumb's killing me, all this stuff, and then I came in today. I was like, my chops felt great. Yesterday I was like, oh, I can't play anything, and today it felt like I could play anything. So that's
That's
the
it.
thing. It's like is from day to day how different for me it is.
Do you
So
uh do you spend any time worrying about that? Because I do, and it's probably silly, but I coming playing so young with adults. I've now seen complete arcs of guys who were my idols, who were in their 30s and early 40s when I heard them first, and now they're 60 and they can't play anymore. And that's like I can't let that happen to me. You know what I mean? Do you worry about that at all?
no, well, um, I feel like I know more now than I've ever known in my life, and if I practice every day, my chops are the best that they've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
If I practice every day for a couple weeks or so, even though I don't always get to do that, but
Yeah.
as long as you keep playing um, and keep learning new stuff, I don't think that I don't yeah I can't see that happening honestly.
See, the learning new stuff to me, I think, is the key to keeping it up because there's a lot of guys who keep gigging, but they just play the same thing for 40 years, and so the facility goes down,
Yes.
and but when you're pushing yourself to learn something new, it kind of stays, you keep the
Yeah.
facility. Yeah, that's yeah. All right.
I'm always learning new stuff, or actually, a lot of times I'm remembering stuff that I knew 30 years ago. I did an Instagram post the other day where I was like, well, what am I going to do today? And I was like, oh, half diminished arpeggios, moving up minor thirds.
Yeah.
Because that would be something, because I'd have students, oh, I can't play over minor 2/5s. And I'd think, okay, what are good things to do to show people that have a hard time? And I would come up with all these hacks, as people would call them today. So you got E half diminished. So play that arpeggio, then move it up a minor third and play that arpeggio. And
Yeah.
it'll give you the altered notes. And then all of a sudden, I'd finally have students that could play over a minor 2/5.
Mm.
Like, thank God. So any little shortcut I could think of for people to kind of get in their brains, um, and those kind of things I just remember every day. It's a new things I think about.
Well, it's amazing too, teaching or even just making videos and stuff like that. I don't give lessons that often, but when I do, I come away from it like all of a sudden, it's not that I'm not playing that stuff already, but I don't think about it ever because you're just playing, we're just fucking improvising. So when you are forced to show it to somebody, it re-registers, and then you find new stuff out of a really old thing that you already knew, which is great.
Well, Josh, you know the thing. You always learn more than the student when you're teaching a lesson.
Always, always, yeah. Yeah. All right, last question.
Yeah.
Uh, do you have a 5-year plan? Is it just keep growing what you're doing? Do you want to get back out there gigging? You want to be back producing Like, what's the 5-year plan for you?
Well, I'm not sure.
Hopefully, it's make a record, man. I want to hear a record.
Maybe make a record, Josh. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll probably make a record at some point. Um, I don't know. I just want to keep getting better, and keep doing what I'm doing, but keep improving it.
Yeah,
That's the thing. I mean, that's honestly, I just want to keep getting better as a player, making videos, as a teacher, whatever. I just at everything that I'm doing as an engineer. Um, that's really my goal. It's not to. I don't need to wow anyone with anything. I just, you know, I gave up on that decades ago.
yeah. Well, that's a healthy attitude, though. I mean, it's like, and what's more noble than just trying to be the best you can be every day and doing it because you just love it so much and you have to. That's the best. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the enjoyment I get from playing is just, you know, I feel bad for people that don't have that,
Yeah.
because it's I mean, you know, Josh, how fun it is
It's
just to play. It's the
it's the
best.
greatest feeling. I mean, since I was 6 years old, I've had this friend that I could go in my room by myself, but never feel alone. And it was always there for me. And it's still, I feel the same now as I did when I was 9, putting my headphones on and playing along to Albert King or to the Allman Brothers or whatever. It's like nothing has changed.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is amazing.
exactly.
Well, dude, thank you for doing this, man. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Again, you're a massive inspiration on many fronts. So I just can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, man.